Hello, I'm Jerry Champlin, President of the League of Women Voters Comal area, which covers Comal and Guadalupe counties. Due to technical difficulties, the first few minutes of this video introducing the League and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America is being re-recorded and spliced onto the original recording of the March 15th meeting. For those not familiar with our organization, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit political organization that never supports or opposes any candidate or party. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. We envision a democracy in which each person has the right, the desire, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. A reminder, local elections are scheduled May 6th. These elections include local municipal positions and propositions, school board trustees, and bonds, officials and issues that impact your everyday life. Please make a plan to vote. Ensure your registration is up to date. The registration deadline is April 6th. Applications to vote by mail must be received by your county elections office by Tuesday, April 25th. More information is available on our website, lwvcomal.org, and our online voters guide at vote411.org will be available in early April before the start of early voting on April 24th. We hope to have some recorded candidate forums available by early April. Check our website for those. We're celebrating Women's History Month with this March 15th program and recording. Melinda Gates said, "Women speaking up for themselves and for those around them is the strongest force we have to change the world." We are pleased to welcome a woman who is speaking up. Molly Bursey, the founder of the New Braunfels San Marcos chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Gun safety is a priority issue for LWV in Texas, and we appreciate the work that Moms Demand Action is doing. Moms Demand Action is a grassroots movement of American mothers and others fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. They work to pass stronger gun laws and to close the loopholes that jeopardize the safety of our families. Moms Demand Action also works in communities and with business leaders to encourage a culture of responsible gun ownership. They know that gun violence is preventable and are committed to doing what it takes to keep families safe. Moms Demand Action was founded in 2012 by Shannon Watts, a mother of 5. The day after the Sandy Hook tragedy, Shannon started a Facebook group with the message that all Americans can and should do more to reduce gun violence. The online conversation turned into a movement of moms, dads, students, families, concerned citizens, and survivors, working together with partners in the gun violence prevention movement to end this uniquely American crisis. Moms Demand Action has established a volunteer chapter in every state of the country and Washington, D.C., and is part of Every Town for Gun Safety, the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country, with nearly 10 million supporters. Now we join the original recording of Molly Bursey, the New Braunfels San Marcos founder, speaking on March 15th.
I moved to New Braunfels in early 2016. My husband grew up here. He was a unicorn. And right before I moved, a good friend of mine was the chapter leader for the Arkansas chapter of Moms Demand Action. Shannon Watts, the founder, came to the Clinton School of Public Service, and I got to hear her speak right before we moved. I, like many other people all over this country, because we're awash in gun violence, just didn't think that there was much that could be done. My first semester of teaching was Columbine. Our classroom doors didn't lock from the inside. And I just thought, well, I mean, what can you do, right? Like, I mean, I certainly couldn't do anything about it. And then I heard Shannon Watts speak, and she started talking about these little tiny victories that regular moms, mothers and others had all over the country, from the signage campaign I talked about, to getting Target to disallow open carry, Starbucks, Chipotle, all these different places. What I started to dawn on me was that the people selling guns had written our laws for far, far too long. And it was going to take a whole army of women to push back against this. So our organizing manager at the time was there in Little Rock. She lived in San Antonio, and I said, hey, I'm moving to New Braunfels, you know, I'm really excited, I want to get involved. She said, there's not a group there in New Braunfels. I was like, well, you know, it's got to be like fairly progressive. It's right in there between Austin and San Antonio. And she had the same reaction and was just like, I'm sorry, no, that is not the case. And I said, well, you know, I'm going to start this because I felt once I saw how much work there was to be done, I knew I had to do it. I was compelled. I could not stay on the sidelines any longer. And so in October 2016, we had our first meeting in New Braunfels. I think besides me and Jamie, the one I met in Arkansas, there were 3 people came. You know, I was sad and like, you know, but I was new to organizing, and it takes a long time and a lot of dedication to build a movement, especially in a city like New Braunfels. What I'm proud to say now is that we are the first local group outside of a major city in Texas to have lasted for as long as we have. And we're now, as Jerry mentioned, we're really Hays and Comal County. We've done so much here in New Braunfels, from the police department partnering with us to do a Be Smart presentation. We have spoken to the school board about not arming teachers. We've had the mayor give a proclamation for National Gun Violence Awareness Day on a couple of occasions, also in San Marcos. We've done Pride. We table a lot, and we'll talk about these programs, Be Smart and Wear Orange. I imagine a lot of you were at the March for Our Lives immediately following the shooting in Parkland, Florida. We helped organize that. Marched with the Crisis Center in the Fair Parade. And because of our proximity to Austin, I fell in love, hate, with the Texas legislature. And that is my role now as a volunteer. I'm the legislative lead for the whole Texas chapter. So I lead those efforts up there. And I can't seem to quit Austin. I'm so glad it's every other year. Most states are every year. And in Tennessee, they hear every single bill, which is just bananas. All right. Yeah. Okay. I did want to tell you just a couple of our 501c are truly, we're a 501c3 and a 501c4. Our 501c3 programs include Be Smart and Wear Orange, and we've done a lot of talking about those programs. Specifically, they fit really well, especially Be Smart in this community. And what Be Smart is an education program for adults that talks about responsible storage of firearms in homes and vehicles. It's an acronym. The S stands for secure your guns in your homes and vehicles. The M stands for model responsible behavior. The A is to ask about the presence of guns before your child visits someone else's home, which is a real eye-opener for me. And I'm not sure that I would have done that, honestly. I want to tell you, I've had that conversation. My son's 11 now. He was 4 when we moved here. And every single time to a person, that conversation has gone really well. And so many parents have said, you know, I never thought to ask. You know, we might inform folks about if our kid has an allergy or are they okay with dogs. We also need to just make it normal to ask, you know, do you have a gun in your home? And if so, how do you store it? And I do that when I'm with wish, you know, if we all three go over and he's gonna be running around someone's house, I'll ask. And, you know, some folks have said, well, I'll have to lock it up. And it's like, great. Or sometimes I make my husband do it, you know, if it's one of his friends. The R stands for recognize the risks that guns pose when it comes to teen suicide. This, I know we are aware that there's a suicide crisis amongst our youth. Bear with me as I talk about statistics, but about 90% of attempts at suicide are fatal with when you attempt with a firearm. By comparison, about 10% of all other methods combined are fatal usually. So 90% of the time you're going to succeed in your suicide attempt with a firearm. Most of the time you don't succeed by any other means. Around 70% of people who survive a suicide attempt go on to live out the rest of their lives. They don't die by suicide. So the fallacy that suicide is not gun violence or is not preventable is really just not true. It's a really difficult subject to talk about, but the reason we only present Be Smart to adults is because it is never, ever a child's responsibility to keep themselves safe from a gun, ever. I always say, you know, we don't allow unsupervised access to firearms because there are families who hunt, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And then the T in Be Smart is to tell your peers to be smart. So we try to take tabling opportunities. We've done a lot of that around town at festivals, anywhere they'll have us really. And you know, we have presented to the PTA, no, yes, the presidents of all the PTAs and NBISD. And as the New Braunfels group, I'll tell you about that, is getting back up and started. They're really going to push that out again and redouble those efforts. And then every first weekend in June is Wear Orange weekend. You can read about Wear Orange, but basically the orange is the color that hunters wear in the woods. Say, don't shoot me. It's National Gun Violence Awareness Weekend. We have shifted from a big celebration to doing more service projects to give back to our communities. And it's a really important time. It happens right after the end of session this year. So we'll see what I'm up for, but hopefully our new lead here in town will have some activity. Okay, just want to check the time. Here's my big passion right here. As I said, the legislature really grabbed me and helped me, and I don't seem to be able to quit it. So I showed you those first Texas moms, and they actually went to the Capitol in 2013, which was immediately after the shooting in Newtown. But the first picture they had, the first advocacy day was in 2015, and they baked cookies for all the offices, visited every office. And at that time, there were many Democratic lawmakers who didn't want to be seen with them. It was a really tough subject to talk about, and people were very angry that women thought that they could come up and speak to them about gun laws. Excuse me. And you can see how we've grown. Unfortunately, I said when I came in here that I mark time a lot of times by the big mass shootings, and we've had a lot of them here in Texas. But my first advocacy day or lobby day was in 2017. We had about 200 people. In 2019, we had over 400. That was our first. It was the year mark actually of the shooting in Parkland. Last session was tough, but we held over 70 meetings with lawmakers and their staff and their constituents over Zoom. So we were able to reach out into their districts and bring their constituents into a Zoom to meet with as many lawmakers as we could. that was a lot of work. We carried that over this session to a few key allies and committee members. But we actually, for the first time ever this session, we had 500 to 600. We're still not sure. As we joined with other gun violence prevention organizations, including Giffords, Texas Gun Sense, Community Justice Action Fund, Lives Rob from Uvalde, the Texas AFT. I think there are over 30 partner orgs in our coalition-led advocacy day. We featured speakers from Uvalde, including Caitlin Gonzalez, a 10-year-old whose friends were killed, and Roland Gutierrez, Senator Gutierrez. Not a lot of lawmakers. We're focusing, and I'll talk a little bit about it when I talk about our priorities this session, but we're focusing on violence intervention programs, community-based violence intervention programs. And there's one called Big Mama Safe House that's down in San Antonio. The founder of that, they go into their community and try to intervene. It can be hospital-based intervention, it can be group violence intervention. And the good thing when you're up at the legislature is it doesn't have to just be gun violence intervention. It can be preventing all types of violence. So Benny Price, the founder of Big Mama Safe House, was there. LULAC was a partner with us, and it was really, really powerful. The picture doesn't do it justice. It was incredible, and it was a lot of hard work to get everyone together. And now it's so funny that the ledge has been in session since January, but we're just now getting committee hearings on these bills. You know, it's like they pack it all into the last couple of months, and that's really hard. But here's what we expect from the bills that have been filed. I think there's over 200 gun bills that have been filed. We're of course going to be on defense, as we always are. But we do have some offensive priorities for once. So we expect an expansion of the ways that people can carry without a permit, carry handguns in public without a permit. Last session, they eliminated the need for a background check and any safety training to carry handguns in public. We have seen bills about lowering the age to 18. However, a federal judge has already ruled that 18-year-olds can carry without a permit, in fact. So that is happening right now. That is the law. That includes high schoolers who can leave those guns in their cars in the parking lot due to a bill that was passed, I think, in 2019. They're going to try to expand the number of places into which folks can carry, including into K-12 schools. There's one I saw that allows a license to carry holder to carry into K-12 schools. Bars, football games, courthouses, hospitals, those kinds of places. I was chatting a little bit about HB 3 earlier, and it just when bills are given really low numbers like that, it means they're a real priority for the Speaker of the House and or the Dan Patrick of the Senate. HB 3 requires, in order for schools to receive their school safety allotment, their money for school safety, to have an armed presence on campus. The audacity of that policy after what happened in Uvalde, after every gun every good guy had, not stopping or slowing down the slaughter of those two teachers and all those children, is infuriating. It's just infuriating because at the Texas Capitol, one cannot carry a long gun at all. Open carry of long guns is not allowed on Capitol grounds. They don't arm their pages and staffers and ask them to protect. They are protected by DPS troopers. And most gallingly to me, one cannot carry without a permit into the Capitol unless they undergo a background check first. So NBISD and even Comal ISD, we have school resource officers. We're going to have the funding to have professionals. Not that it's a deterrent to shootings, but we will be able to feel safer that it's actually, that's their sole job is for security. Many school districts will adopt the Marshall or Guardian plan, which is arming of teachers and school staff. And as a former middle school teacher, I can tell you it's dangerous, it's terrifying, it's galling. And I've already written my testimony, even though it's not scheduled for a committee yet. That will most likely pass, and we'll do everything we can to fight that. A little bit of good news, and I should have put this on our offensive, is there is a chance for the families in Uvalde, their call after Robb Elementary was to please raise the age to purchase semi-automatic guns from 18 to 21. 18 to 20-year-olds commit gun homicides at triple the rate of those 21 and older. This was a bipartisan, those families came together and said, this is what we want. And I said we did, so we carried that over some constituent meetings with lawmakers. So we did that with Representative Tracy King of Uvalde, who is a Democrat who voted for permitless carry. He has been in the legislature for over 20 years. And we knew that the only chance for a raise the age bill to move anywhere was if he filed it. And on the call with us, he said, in fact, he was going to file a raise the age bill, and he did. And we're really, really excited about that. What that means is that we know it'll get a hearing. I should say, Speaker Phelan also created a special committee, a select committee for community safety. And in the charges of that, can you tell, getting deep in the weeds? I'll move on here in just a minute. In the chart, I've never seen this before. I've always seen, oh, the charges are, examining mass violence. Remember that after El Paso, or do masks contribute to the mass violence that are, just silliness. But in those charges of that committee, it said to examine the purchase, possession, and use of firearms. And that is like an enormous step forward. That's huge for there to be a committee that has the word firearms in it and talks about how we purchase those guns. So we're hopeful. I mean, I'd say high hopes. Representative King's bill gets out of the House, and then we have to, the Senate would be a heavier lift. It'll definitely get a hearing, so that's exciting. And no matter what, we had committed before we spoke with Rep. King to carry that torch for those families, no matter what. That is what they asked for, and that is what we will push for. So it was good news that it'll get a hearing. I mentioned CVIPs, these community violence intervention programs. This is real wonky. If you thought I was wonky before, I'm not going to go into this, but we have worked with some other reps to create a rider that would fund these community violence intervention programs. As you know, we have a budget surplus here in Texas, and we're really, really hopeful that this will be nonpartisan and will give lots of money to these really grassroots and these communities that are affected most by gun violence and other violence. We're not saying gun, and we will be behind the scenes on pushing this rider. We do not need the credit, and it would only hurt. It would only hurt those efforts for us to be seen pushing for that. What if you would like, if anyone here has relationships with your commissioner, county judge, or mayor, anyone with any of those type of stakeholders, if they can tell our house member or house members who they know, so that would be Donna Campbell and Carrie Isaac. Maybe we just don't tell her. Maybe it's maybe we just forget about that. Anyways,
The league has an easy take action tool where individuals can just zip off emails to their representatives saying, please support this, please support this. I think it's worth doing at least that.
agree. Because the biggest well, I'll tell you that in a minute, but I'm gonna say it now and then I'll say it again. We are not polarized on this issue. Texans are not polarized on this issue. Just hold that. And I guess that's one reason I keep going, because our big coalition-led advocacy day was the Texas majority to end gun violence, because an overwhelming majority of Texans want these measures implemented, background checks on every gun sale, raising the age. They don't want their teachers armed. It is, and that's what I'll tell every reporter I talk to, is stop saying that, there really aren't two sides. It's extremists and then there's Texans. Oh, there it is. There you go. This poll, lucky for us, came out at the University of Houston right before our advocacy day at the end of February. So it's recent polling, but we've all seen it. We see it over and over again. An ERPO, by the way, is what we call Extreme Risk Protection Order. It is a red flag law that allows for temporary removal of access to firearms to somebody who has been deemed through due process, a judge, law enforcement, to be a risk to themselves or someone else. Right now, if you're like, my 19-year-old son, he's started stocking up on guns and he really is into these hateful websites, that there's nothing that the police can do. Or ERPOs are used a lot of times to prevent suicides. So that's the big thing. I'd like to show you, if it's okay, what it looks like when we fight. It's 5 minutes and then I'm pretty much finished. Is that okay? Do we have time? Okay.
Good to talk to you. Myself and the Texas chapter of and Action for Gun Sense in America. We are here in force today. This is my first time to ever participate in anything like this. I'm part of the 81%. I am part of the 81%. I am the 81% of Texans who oppose permitless carry. I'm the proud daughter of immigrants who left the country, was riddled with gun violence. I am a nurse practitioner. I'm a gun owner. I'm a 16-year-old high school sophomore from Houston. I am a survivor of gun violence. I'm also proud to come here testifying for the first time in memory of two extended family members who have died in gun violence. I lost my son, Harrison Schmidt, to gun violence. I just really wanted to tell you the why that motivated me to be here today. Here's my why. So by the time my daughter graduates from high school, she will have practiced avoiding her death at the hands of an active shooter at school with a little over 30 times. I am a school secretary at an elementary school. I am the first line of defense in protecting 600 little children and 90 staff members against horrific threats. As a Santa Fe parent and volunteer, we live by the furs when a gun makes it on campus. HB 1927 would allow anyone to carry a loaded handgun with no safety training or no background check. In public places, in crowds, next to your family, next to my family. This bill arms everyone first and then tries to figure out if they're a risk second. I think if we're willing to admit it, many of us know someone who shouldn't carry a firearm. Under current law, people with certain recent criminal histories and chemical dependency prohibited from an LTC permit. I think that people that have guns should be both people that are responsible, law-abiding, and in a good mental state. License to carry program actually does have a safety net that catches those who may already own guns, they have not gone through a background check because of loopholes in our background check laws. The LTC course provides an introduction to the law and basic firearm safety. As an Army veteran, I understand that training, testing, and qualifying are vital. Removing the LTC requirement allows for more unintentional shootings to happen. Texas leads the entire nation in incidents where children have gained access to loaded, unsecured guns and unintentionally shot themselves, family member, or a friend. Texas has continued with the loosening regulations on guns since 2013. And since that time, there have been several high-profile mass shooting events. In this day and age of daily mass shootings, it's frankly irresponsible in schools that the Texas legislature has yet to pass one single proactive gun safety law. Unbelievable. After years of action on gun violence, this is the legislature's answer, allowing permitless carry? Where are the common sense gun regulations? Pass universal background checks, ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazine purchases, close the gun show loopholes and the boyfriend loopholes, pass red flag laws. Gun laws work. States that have stronger gun laws have lower per capita gun deaths. The truth is that more guns don't make us safer. Do not pass dangerous legislation just because other states make the choice to do so. As a mother and a nurse, I cannot think of one reason to believe that permitless carry will make anyone safer. Not one. Law enforcement opposed permitless carry. State leaders opposed permitless carry. Medical personnel opposed permitless carry. I come from a family of gun owners, and my family does not support this bill. 70% of Republicans are opposed, 80% of the general public are opposed. What is the problem we're trying to solve here? Texas gun rights, open carry Texas, and Proud Boys, labeled an extremist hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, want this bill. They live in a fever dream in which one random Sunday at Kroger, they will be called upon to step up and become a good guy with a gun and save the innocents in a hail of bullets. Tourists from states and countries with reasonable gun laws much longer to our beautiful state as safe. As Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia once said, like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is possible to hold two thoughts at once. To support gun rights and to understand that with rights come responsibility. Isn't one of the most basic responsibilities of government, any government, is to protect the safety of its citizens? You say you want to do constitutional activity. I also have a right to feel free in my pursuit of that. But the amount of times I've uttered the words "never again" as a result of anti-Semitic shootings exceeds the number I had ever anticipated.
House Bill 1927 does not prohibit untrained, unvetted anti-Semites from taking firearms into my synagogue, and to support it is to ask us to choose between safety and expressing our identity.
I can see the writing. While I know a majority of you are intent on passing this law, despite evidence that Texas voters don't want it, against proof of its recklessness. This hearing is simply a formality, but it gives me the opportunity to tell you in person you've chosen the wrong side. Please don't pass an unpopular bill that will only increase our gun violence rate and traumatize families and communities. If we get this wrong, if permitless carry passes, lives will be lost. No try again. Can you live with this? Protect our communities. Do the right thing. Thank you.
Obviously that we knew what we were getting into, when we went that day. I will say that, law enforcement, including our own, vocally opposed permitless carry on multiple occasions, and they passed it anyway. So that's what it looks like when we fight, and you'll see we're not just mothers. We need everyone in this fight. Oops, sorry. Trying to get to the next. There we go. Okay. Lastly, I do want to get, if there are any questions, but I think you should know that Reagan Brendel, who I encourage to speak tonight, she's the new leader here. It's hard for me to call it Comal, but it is Comal County. We're not just New Braunfels anymore. We met with her after Uvalde, and we we told her, "Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean, it's a lot of work. Are you sure you want to take this on?" And she just, yep. She's a veterinarian finishing up her master's degree in public health, and she still has taken this on. And like so many of us women, can no longer stand on the sidelines. So the next meeting, it's difficult to see, but we do have an app. The next meeting here in New Braunfels will be at the library on the 25th at 3 p.m. Joan has met Reagan, our new leader. We're now, I guess you'd call it the corridor. We span this corridor, Kyle Buda, Wimberley. We're taking up people from Schertz, Selma, Cibolo, that area, but San Antonio has their own group as well. We do have fun. We have to doing this work, and we hope you'll join us. I think that's it. And questions?
What work have you done with Comal? You mentioned the book.
Not a lot. It took Uvalde for the Texas AFT to even come and join us. And that's no shame on them. It's a really difficult subject to work on here in Texas. What I did with Comal, I read an article that maybe some of y'all read in the Herald Zeitung that said it made it seem like they were going to have armed volunteers, like retired military and retired law enforcement at Comal schools. So I called Sheriff Reynolds, who's very responsive and worked hard with Senator Campbell, asking, behind the scenes, because he's a Republican elected sheriff here in Comal County, so he does what he can, and he let her know what his opposition was to permitless carry. And he had another Mark, who's in charge of the school resource officers there at the sheriff's office, who assured me that no, these were the only difference between the deputies armed in Comal schools was that these were part-time. That they, in fact, qualified, they did more qualification with their guns than a regular sheriff's deputy. Anyone in the school, they require much more training before they could become a school resource officer. They were employed, there was no volunteer thing going on. And the most interesting thing he said to me was, it's debatable. And what the evidence shows us is that having an armed presence on school campuses doesn't really deter school shooters, but here we are. So that's that's where the work I did with MBIC was. I don't know if y'all remember, in 2017, some parents stored their loaded handgun in their second grader's backpack, and she brought it to County Line Elementary. So former Chief Weiberg, whose brother unintentionally shot himself in the ear when he was 3, survived, did a Be Smart open house there at the police station. And he had the lobbyists from the NRA and the head of the Texas State Rifle Association in his office a couple days after they announced that, telling him not to work with Be Smart, which is completely I mean, it's affiliated with Moms Demand Action, but it is drop your politics at the door, right? We're just here to talk this. So it's been difficult for them to partner with us again. Perhaps the climate has changed. I'm not sure.
Are there any statistics yet about what difference open sharing has in
Open carry or permits?
our promotes?
No, the data, so she asked if there's any data about the difference permitless carry has made. We were invited to testify last summer about the effects of permitless carry. It was really a trolling by the chair of that committee. It was very strange. And we declined because we are evidence-based. When we go and testify about anything, it has to be checked several times by our researchers. And so we don't have causation or correlation evidence for permitless carry. What we do have is a lot of evidence about the strength of a state's gun laws and their rates of gun homicide and gun injury. And you can go to everytownresearch.org and find all of that and great graphics. And you can look at state by state. You can look at it by domestic violence, unintentional shootings by children. And they're, you know, as now, of course, the gun lobby has underfunded the ATF for decades. So our research is thin, but as Giffords, as Everytown start to do it on their own, as the National Gun Violence Archive are really starting to do this on their own. So we're able to give some evidence about the weaker the gun laws, the higher the gun deaths. Yes. So she asked if we are polarized on this issue, what's the deal? And you know, well, I would say that I would say gerrymandering. I watched a pretty moderate former mayor of ours go far to the right in order to try to win his primary, his Republican primary. And, you know, he's visiting the border and, you know, and we'd met with him prior to the 2017 session. He was in office. And while he wouldn't go on the record, you know, he did not agree. We were fighting for permitless carry then and guns everywhere. So I'd say it's that, you know, that they're speaking, I think it's 4% of Texas voters vote in the Republican primary. So they're speaking to 4% of Texas voters. Until we are single issue voters on this issue, and until, you know, we can, and I think, you know, within the next decade, maybe the demographics change so much that the gerrymandering is over. That's my hope. But yeah, I think it's because they are speaking to a very small group of extremists in order to, you know, ignoring their conscience in order to hold on to power and keep their seats.
A good argument for both primaries, both local elections, because it does. I listened to the former prime minister in New Zealand, visiting the United States. I don't know about the policy.
Yes.
But I'm not that knowledgeable. Just she was in the United States when the lobby happened. So just in the interview, they brought that up because, from my understanding, that they had a shooting of students or young people, and then they just decided nationally that this was so horrific that unless you owned a farm or you were in law enforcement, just very specialized cases where you would need to use a gun for your job, that people weren't going to have them. And New Zealanders willing to surrender their weapons. And
Yeah, I know Carla Ron, yeah, that, and, she lived in San Diego when it happened and was on, the organization that was helping to develop a memorial when they moved to Texas. And she said, if we weren't going to change things after that, we would never, it just seemed that the NRA was powerful and people just, it happens and then you just move on. So how do we break that? It's certainly we are not going to do what New Zealand did. That in this country, so many people are misinterpreting what your goal is.
There's a couple of things about that. I meant to, we should have celebrated the bipartisan legislation that John Cornyn helped pass in the wake of Uvalde. He, from my understanding, was ashamed and really broken up about what happened there, and really bucked the gun lobby to pass that legislation. You know, unfortunately, it left a lot of those decisions up to states and their gun laws that they will pass or already have in place. Funding for red flag laws are proposed. I think a couple of things. Again, gerrymandering. New Zealand does not have a Second Amendment and doesn't have, 30, 40 years of extremist gun culture. We used to say this is not your grandfather's NRA. Now the NRA they still hold power, but we're talking Gun Owners of America. Started at a white nationalist rally in Estes Park in the 80s. They're there every single day, testifying on every bill. Kerry Isaac was endorsed by GOA. They testified in shirts that said liberty or death, no compromise. We do have a Second Amendment, and that is that's different than any other country. So it's difficult sometimes to compare their gun laws. As we know that, no constitutional right is unlimited. It's up to us as a society to decide what limits we put on our constitutional rights. It's part of that no compromise movement, Gun Owners of America, there's others. They also believe that the Constitution was divinely inspired, as is they believe the Bible was, and I was raised in I had a fundamentalist upbringing, and so I know that way of thinking, right? That God took the hand and wrote the Constitution. So the Second Amendment, they believe is their God-given right. Conveniently ignoring the well-regulated part. I'm sure y'all watched the Jon Stewart clip recently, where he interviewed a state senator from Missouri, I believe, or I'm not sure, but there you go. Thank you. So we're up against, that's their constituency when they're so gerrymandered that they have to be as far right as they can be. I mean, it's being called out. Last session, Diego Bernal's a state rep from San Antonio, and he said on the floor, so many of my colleagues, I think this was about the abortion law, he said, so many of you have come to me, so many of my colleagues from the other side of the aisle come to me and said, I don't agree with this, but I have to vote for it or I will lose my seat. And he said, my question for you, if you vote for these laws, then what's the difference? But, when we live in a 70-30 district, 70% Republican, 30% Democrat, there is no incentive to speak to the majority of Texans. Yes, of all Texas voters, they're speaking to 4% of those people.
Have to remember that it may be 70-30, but there's a huge number that's not there.
Absolutely.
Not everyone is one or the other. A lot of people are just because they're not voting in the primaries at all. So the whole system kind of
Absolutely.
You can, yes, but then you have to go, for somebody who doesn't want to affiliate, go and say, like, I've heard people say, always vote in the primary because you have a say who's gonna be elected. But I would never do that, because I don't wanna add numbers. So,
Right.
but I think there are a lot of people that both parties are missing, that are out there that are new.
I agree. I think most of us are right there in the middle. Most Texans, when I say us. I was born and raised in Boulder, Colorado. If you know anything about Boulder, it is as far left as you can get, really. And one thing, we lived in Arkansas for about 20 years, and then we've been here since 2016. And my husband grew up here. I really learned, and it's actually one of my favorite parts, is finding common ground, not with extremists, but with, if you live on social media, you think everyone's, one or the other, and that's just not the truth. If you speak to your neighbors, to a person, anecdotally, people I talk to in town, people up, even lawmakers, especially staff up in the Capitol, they all agree on what we're working toward. And it's one of my favorite things to get those hard conversations and show that we actually do agree, that we want the same thing, because every Texan, every American deserves and wants for their children to be safe in school and their loved ones to be safe from gun violence. And, if you can start from that common understanding. And as far as voting in primaries, yeah. So my best friend, y'all remember Joe Strauss, Speaker of the House, Texas House for a long time, very moderate. My best friend ran for a seat. It's Steve Allison now. This is Steve Allison's third term. But so many of those folks there in that community always crossed over and voted for Joe Strauss because they didn't want somebody, extremist there, right? Yeah, it's difficult. But then, I can see, oh, you voted in the Republican primary. That's weird. I know a lot of people who voted in the Republican primary to try to stop the more extreme. Man, there's not a right or wrong answer, right? Yes. Yeah.
Nobody knows that, and say, oh, gun violence is great, and this is what on the Wild West. Everybody wants to stop it, and it's just getting that message to the finish line.
And making it your voting issue. Yeah, sorry, I could talk about it forever. Yeah. Yes.
However.
Well, yeah, and the population has exploded, right? So here's one thing that gets me, the most mass shootings involve domestic violence. When I started doing this, my stat was that on average, 50 women are shot and killed every month by their partner, current or former partner. Now, it is 70 women on average every month are shot and killed by their current or former partner. And anyone with under a protective order or with a conviction for domestic violence is a prohibited purchaser and possessor. I have talk till I'm blue in the face to our DA and our police. Well, it really has to come from the judges and the DA to say, do we have a relinquishment program for folks who are effective or a conviction for domestic violence? And what I finally realized, this is, I don't want to end on it, but I was just like, oh, well, we are not as concerned as we need to be about women dying. Right, and recently so there were two impactful rulings. I think they were both in the Fifth Circuit, but don't hold me to that. The one that said that you can carry at 18, the other is that those under a protective order can purchase and maintain possession of their firearms.
That one.
And it's the most dangerous call that a law enforcement officer goes on, is a domestic violence call. I know 2 San Marcos police officers have died in the last few years in domestic violence warrant situations. So I don't know. I mean, I was numb for a long time because I just didn't think there was anything I could do. And I'll tell you that the work is most of the time grueling and not very glamorous, but you our current chapter leader, who is the one in the video with the little bitty blonde girl, she calls us a do-gooder sorority. And you have to build those bonds to keep fighting. Because our kids' lives depend on it. And you're right, it's not just school shootings. Those are statistically very low. There's just so much we could be doing, right? We could get our school districts to send home a letter about safe storage. There's so much, and we have to start somewhere. I chose the weird place up in Austin.
So can I just make a quick one about kind of thinking about that? So like, I was born and raised here in this town. So, you know, what it is now to what it was when I was there. So, yeah. Big one. But just like any other community where it starts growing, all of a sudden, happens, homelessness is coming, violence is going to escalate, all of these things. Thing about it is that you can talk about these things just like racism and all inclusion. You can keep talking about those for years. I mean, we've been talking about race issues past 60 years now. And keep talking and talking and talking and give lip service until action is done, then it just, the wheels keep turning. And that's the whole thing about these politicians too. You know, they'll tell you what you want to hear at that time, and then it takes a backseat to something else. So it's like the mass shootings took front and center like during Valley. But then what happened? Fentanyl came. So now that's been the big thing. So those things get put on, it seems like those things get put on the background after a while. Because, you know, there for a while, it was like the governor had put all this money out to secure the schools before the schools opened up, to put all these things into place, to start putting them in to make them more safe. Who knows what they do?
Well, so
It's just those things. I mean, I just keep hearing a lot of lip service. I just kept on hearing, and it's been through all different types of
Well, so
organizations.
that's disappointing to me because I think maybe you missed the point, which is that by being here tonight, you have taken action, right? You have taken hours out of your life by getting on our mailing list, by coming to a meeting. You are taking action. We are saying no more. And, you know, the fight to change not only the laws around drunk driving, but the culture around drunk driving, that it's no longer socially acceptable to drive drunk. That took decades. And they also had an NRA. They had the alcohol lobby. They had the restaurant lobby. They fought too. We can do this.
But what I'm
We
saying
are
is,
doing it.
what I'm saying is that people are still dying as a result of it.
Right,
You know,
but
so that's what I'm just
right,
trying to.
so we will not end every gun death.
No,
We
no.
will not have a mass turn in of our military style weapons in my lifetime. I will say that what we are forcing our children to endure is a threat to the Second Amendment eventually. And if you want to protect it, you better put some guardrails around that and start enacting some reasonable restrictions, because they're not having it. We just have to remind them that it can be different. And like the gun lobby chipped away at our gun safety bills, we're now trying to patch those back up, and it's hard work. But you're here doing that right now. Showing up helps. Thank you. Yeah, and you can find out. If you want to come to Austin and we have a big push for an important bill. We have a rapid response team. I can email y'all information if you want to hand that out to your members about, if you have the time. It is difficult to participate in state government. Most people, they only have to give you 48 hours before a hearing is called, and most people are working, right? And most Texans are not, don't have proximity to Austin, but if that's something you can do.
I'll repeat. One of the 4 top priority issues for the League of Women Voters for this legislative session is gun safety, community violence prevention. So they are very much on board with the same. We do have on our website, the LWV Texas website, I said, a real easy take action tool. Anytime a bill comes up, you want to shoot off a quick email to your legislators. It only takes a couple minutes. I think last legislative session, our members from our little local league here sent over 3,300 emails to legislators. It's a long battle. Let's not forget that women didn't gain the vote until 1920. And actually, the right to vote was not guaranteed in this country until 1965. And it's being chipped away again. So, and all these rights, I think it was John Lewis said, democracy is not an everlasting thing. We need to fight for it every generation. And on issues like this, it's a long battle. But if you give up, nothing's going to change. That's what I think. When we were up in Austin, we did mention to our chief of staff that gun safety and community violence prevention is a priority for the members. It's always worth letting politicians know that there are constituents out there. Eventually, they may hear from them. Anybody else? Thank you so much.